Welcome on in, everybody. This is the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, John McKechnie. That is Mario Puig. Beautiful time in the sports calendar. Hope springs eternal. We got the draft coming up about a month exactly from right now. The Sweet 16's going on in March Madness. My beautiful Maryland Terrapins are engaging in some sort of strange public humiliation act with their head coach right now. It's also opening day, but we're talking football. We're keeping it to the pigskin on this here feed. So earlier on in the offseason, we broke down our rankings for the rookie quarterbacks and the running backs, and then the combine happened, and we took a look at some ADP stuff last week. We're going to get back to some rookie positional rankings. For today's episode, we're going to be looking at the receivers. So obviously, the combine has unfolded. Pro days have gotten rolling. We talked a bit about Tet McMillan's pro day last week, so not a ton to add there, except I will ask you, do you find that there's maybe less of a chance that he ends up going in the top 10, McMillan does, or do you feel like that's still very much in play for him?
It's in play. I just don't think he will, especially after the pro day. I also think there was a chance McMillan was unlikely to go in the top 10 before the pro day, just because not that he was going to fall much farther than that. I was thinking kind of like, he might fall to 12, something like that, just depending on what other trades up and down might happen. Sometimes things can get a little weird that way. Sometimes a player everybody likes can fall a little further than everybody thinks that he should. So I thought McMillan was always at risk of that because he wasn't a true blue chip. He was just kind of like a really good receiver prospect and arguably the best one in this class, and probably some others too. So if McMillan hadn't run something like a 4.4 flat, I don't think he was ever going to be able to lock himself into the top 10. Also, like this class having two tight ends that are putting kind of like top 15 pressure, I think that could kind of complicate the wide receiver market. Like I could imagine one or both of Tyler Warren and Colson Loveland going ahead of McMillan just because like the tight end market gets a little bit juiced in that range or something, if the demand spreads out just right. But I'm not panicking about McMillan. It was a fine enough 4.55 or whatever it was. But I do think the reality is, while he could be arguably still the top receiver in the class, he's not. It's very easy to argue that he isn't too, both between, not just because of McMillan having a disappointing pro day, but you got details like Matthew Golden's 4.29, the Jayden Higgins. I think I don't mean to make this sound like it's a big story. No one else really seems to care about Jayden Higgins that much, but to me, his combine was so good that it put heat on McMillan too. So you don't have to even see it as like McMillan like losing something as a prospect as much as just losing like market grip, because to me it's more like Higgins and Golden and whoever else have kind of raised their profile, and McMillan has kind of stayed in the same spot.
Yeah, no, exactly. And you bring up the point that maybe the idea of McMillan being a top 10 or even a top 5 was a bit far-fetched, but I got to think after the Patriots were kind of the one team that I thought maybe was the ceiling outcome, but their signing of Stephon Diggs, I would imagine, kind of takes them out of the first round receiver market, provided that they stay at 4.
Right. I still think McMillan would be a really good target for the Patriots, but they've been heavily linked at this point to that. It's the LSU where's that? Where's Campbell from?
Will Campbell.
Is he LSU?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, him. And it makes enough sense, I guess, in theory, if you assume in this theory that Campbell is like some real blue chip left tackle prospect. But yeah, I think the Patriots should have all along and still now should have been thinking trade back. Like if Travis Hunter isn't there for them, I think they should trade back because they need at least 2 offensive line starters probably, like in this draft. Like it's such a problem, they can't let the plan go beyond right now. Like you have to fix this right now. Trading back from where they are is the perfect setup to do it. And even after the trade back, they'd be able to get Drake May another standout weapon, be it McMillan or one of the tight ends. So I don't think I don't think that the Patriots were ever going to be taking McMillan at their initial pick, but all along trading back would have been the way to do it. And I think still, if they get a decent offer to trade back, they should take it because McMillan still would be very useful for them. The problem the Patriots have is there's a lot of players who would be very useful to them right now, and they kind of should try to get as many of them as they can.
Yeah, no, it's a roster that needs a lot of work. You've got your face of the franchise, future of the franchise, in Drake May. You got to do your best to protect him. I think Campbell would make some sense. I'm sure you saw this yesterday from LSU's pro day, but his arms grew since
I love it when
the combine.
I love it when my arms grow when I get up one day. That's good news for him. Yeah, hopefully his arms get. Hopefully they don't get shorter now. That would be sad. But right. I don't know I don't know enough about offensive line stuff. Generally, my whole process about offensive line is just sort of, I don't know. There's just really objectively good indicators, physical traits to have. Long arms, good enough height, strong anchor so that you can withstand bull rushes. And I know Campbell, or I know there's reason to believe Campbell can do lots of good stuff. But not having that blue chip clearing like 34 plus arms, I probably wouldn't take that player that high. But if the other thing is, I feel like the Patriots should be able to trade back, and even as far as like 10 or so, I guess it might be too late to get Campbell. Maybe he'll go like 7 or 8 or something, but it's like, it just seems too early, and especially because they'd have to take him over Hunter at the 4th pick, and it's like, you can't, whatever. Even if you're prioritizing the offensive line and getting good players on the offensive line, you can't really do it from a market position where you're passing on someone like Hunter. It's just not the right way to play it.
No, like that. It's that delicate balance between need and best player available that is always a tricky one to find. Jamie wants to know on the topic of the Patriots, we're giving up on Jalen Polk.
He's in a tough spot, but they're not going to give up on him this soon. I don't have as much hope for Baker, the 4th round guy. He never seemed that good to me, and I don't know if he really endeared himself to the team over the past year. Polk is more so a guy who is gonna. He kind of got benched last year. It arguably should have been benched earlier than he was, and he's gonna need to go to the minors. Basically, he's got to go to the minors for a year, and they're gonna hope that he can come back up and be the player they always thought he was. But it's probably gonna take a year, and in the meantime, he's just gonna. I don't know. Maybe Polk plays special teams. I can't remember. But if he doesn't, he's at risk of being kind of like a scratch guy this year because, barring someone else getting hurt. But I think you can still have hope for Polk turning out to be something like an average starting NFL receiver at some point. As bad as his rookie year was, you can find a similarly bad rookie year from someone like Devontae Adams, extremely anomalous example, but I'm just mentioning it to show it's like sometimes things really aren't as bad as they look. And the weird thing specifically about Polk's rookie season to me was like he was dropping a lot of passes. And I thought that was supposed to be, and it did look like it was a strength of his at Washington, like just snatching the ball in traffic at the high points. And it's like he kind of got some of those looks last year and he would just drop the ball. So I don't know. I guess I'm inclined to see it as like either he kind of was just really lucky his whole college career, or he had the yips last year, and maybe the yips will go away. But in the meantime, the Patriots can't wait for him. They have to get other people who can play right now.
No, I think that's right, and I think that that there's a little bit of almost like undue pressure on Polk. Like I think most of us felt like it was a bit of a reach where the Patriots got him, especially relative to like who else was on the board.
Going like right after McConkey, and this is what you get. Brutal.
Yeah, exactly. So like that's just kind of like another like added layer there. And then I will continue to push this agenda until further notice, but I think Pop Douglas is legit. So
yeah, I hate how they're treating Douglas. I feel like maybe Diggs will play flanker and they'll keep Douglas open in the slot. But if they go burying Douglas out of like some stubbornness about blocking from the slot, that would be disappointing. And at the very least, hopefully they trade Douglas otherwise to a team that can use him, because I think he can definitely play.
No, I do as well. Before we get on to our next rookie receiver, we do have a message from our pals over at Edge Boost. Have you ever had your debit card declined or had to call your bank at 3 a.m. in Vegas? Well, Edge Boost is the first consumer-facing online bank dedicated to the gaming industry. There are numerous benefits to using Edge Boost: $250K per day in debit deposits, unlimited withdrawals, cashback on sports betting, DFS, and sweeps. You deposit $25, you get $25, 100% approval for all gaming activity. You get financial segmentation for discretion and responsible gaming, compatible today for prediction markets, iCasino, DFS, sports betting, lottery, brick and mortar casinos, horse racing, and sweeps. No transaction reviews or account freezes. Visit edgeboost.bet today and use promo code ROTOPOD. That's promo code ROTOPOD. Also got a message from our presenting sponsors. All right, we're on to the next cluster of receivers who we think have a pretty good chance of going in the first round. So Luther Burden, guy out of Missouri, former 5-star. He just went. I'm participating in an underdog best ball right now to kind of keep tabs on the market. He was the next rookie receiver to come off the board. McMillan went at the end of the 4th. Burden middle of the 6th, and Matthew Golden middle of the 7th. Does the market have that right?
That's tough for me. I think even the McMillan pick is somewhat justifiable, but I don't feel that comfortable about having him so far ahead of the other two at this point. I feel like the order of them is not that important. It's more like they're just, I think the evidence right now says they're kind of all in a similar boat. I do think Golden's maybe the tougher one for me, because I know this is kind of a ridiculous thing to say, but I just kind of don't believe his 40 time. Not that I am truly arguing that he did not literally run that fast. That's not really it. It's more like I just don't think he's that fast on the field, and it's almost to the point that if he really is that fast, it's almost concerning to me that Golden didn't produce more, because it's like, well, why didn't it? Clearly wasn't for a lack of speed. Why couldn't you dominate? He had like 4 dominant games, and it's there's maybe some kind of justification, excuse for that. Maybe it's like because he transferred to Texas and it was his first year as a transfer player, and because Isaiah Bond was like a 5-star recruit of more notoriety by far than Golden, like maybe the Texas program didn't give Golden a fair shake in the way that they built the game plans. I don't know. It's stuff like that is totally possible, but if it's not the explanation for Golden's production being less than the other two, and especially less than McMillan, I guess that's a basis for me to put Golden. In fact, I have Golden behind Jayden Higgins. So I just think all those guys, we should be prepared to see all 4 of them play more than 800 snaps this year. And I don't know, if some of them land on a pretty decent offense, they could be quite productive. And in the meantime, though, I don't know if I'm so certain that like McMillan will end up in a way better spot than Golden, or enough for that probability to be strong enough for the distance between them to be as far as it is. But yeah, I think with Burden, as much as his stats took a downturn this year, he first of all, he tested great at the combine, so we know he's a uniquely good athlete, and his sophomore year was productive enough. His sophomore year was excellent.
Awesome.
If he had a junior year like a sophomore year production, Burden would be a top 10 pick. So
sure.
For those reasons, I think we can take like the leap of faith on him and sort of like fade his regression, narrative from his junior year. But there's with McMillan having more or less average testing, I can't put him that far ahead of those other 3 guys.
So I'll I'll start with Golden and then work over to Burden. I guess like Golden's just kind of an interesting guy. Like he always kind of caught
Yeah.
my eye at Houston. I want to say when he was a true freshman, like Tank Dell was there, so he was obviously kind of like the main guy in that offense. But playing college DFS, you always wanted a piece of the Houston passing game, but Dell was oftentimes one of the top build guys, and it's like, well, Golden's getting looks, he's getting targets, and he's doing something with them. He scored 7 touchdowns on 38 catches as a true freshman. Houston was much worse in his second season there, but I felt like this year at Texas, Bond was overrated, and Golden was always like that consistent producer. Obviously, had like some huge games in there in the playoffs. His game against Arizona State was pretty bonkers. Also did really well against Georgia in the SEC championship game. So I always liked him, but I think that the combine was so loud that it really like puts your feet to the fire as to like how much do you actually like this prospect. And I'm going back and forth on it a little bit. I still think that he's probably like a late first round talent. I don't know if he ends up getting drafted before then or not, but it seems like there's a distinct possibility that he does. And in Burden's case, I just kind of want to ask you, because there's been sort of a prevailing narrative that's taken off or taken hold when it comes to Burden, and people are really quibbling with how he got to his production. Like but again, we know that he was a high pedigree guy, 5-star. I think he was the number 1 receiver in his class. Picks Missouri over Alabama and Georgia. Kind of has a so-so freshman year, takes off as does Missouri in the 2023 season. And this year it all kind of like comes back down to earth a little bit, but people really seem to be gripping onto the fact that there's a lot of quote unquote like manufactured touches and short routes. Like there's questions about, does he run the full route tree? And I suppose the combine could go ahead and solve some of those questions, proving that he has that athleticism. But what do you think of what sort of the industry itself has come up with when it comes to Burden as far as the negatives?
This is stuff I don't have a good answer for, unfortunately, because it is I think it's pending insider knowledge of the team and its inner workings, because there is definitely a such thing as coaches being so bad and making up game plans that are so ill-conceived that it puts players in a position where they just are not nearly as successful as they could be. The third year of Burden's at Missouri last year might be one of those seasons, and I think there's some reason to take the possibility seriously, if only because the application was a lot different than his sophomore year. It's like the same receiver personnel was on the team those both seasons, and like the application of the two players, the application of Burden and Theo Wees, the other guy, was quite a bit different from 2 years ago to last year. Like basically Wees started getting a lot of these targets that were more downfield that Burden was getting his sophomore year, but did not last year. So you see things like that change instead of, the player failing in instances that they didn't previously. And that to me is a production decline that is, plausibly not due to the player and is due to reasons outside their control. So I have to admit, just looking at his statistical production and like his lore, Burden's trajectory reminds me a lot of N'Keal Harry, but the players are so different. I'm not, even though I'm worried about like kind of like how their chart is going in the same pattern so far. I think Burden is going to stay on like a productive path and not tank at the draft point like Harry did.
Boy, yes, he did. And yeah, a lot of Patriots strays coming from this episode. We do have a question from our guy, Michael. Appreciate it, Michael. All right. Is Tet McMillan a golden, for lack of a better word, pick at 103 in a dynasty rookie draft? So do you view him as the third best rookie you could get, or would you target receivers like Jayden Higgins, Jalen Knoll, or Elic Ayomanor in the second or third round? So I think I'm going running back if I get third.
If Omarion Hampton is there at 3, that certainly would be a justifiable, if not conventionally strong pick. It's the super flex detail that makes this tough for me, because I hate to say this, I'm especially, I should say, stupid about super flex, and this quarterback class makes me really queasy. I think you can make a case for Cam Ward being the first overall pick, though, in Superflex. So if Genty is going second, and if what's his name, the quarterback I just said,
Cam Ward,
if he's going first and Genty's going second, or some combination of that, McMillan would be a fair selection at the 3rd pick. But I do prefer Hampton over McMillan if running back and wide receiver are equal, and at the very least, I definitely have a lot of faith in Jayden Higgins, to the point that not to say like his teammate Noel or Ayomanor are not good prospects in their own right, but to me, Higgins is pretty close to McMillan, if not at the same spot. So if you can get Hampton at 1, Higgins at 2, I think that would be pretty great, assuming you don't have like some big quarterback need.
I think I'm going running back there. Yeah, 3 is just an interesting kind of tricky spot as far as this year's rookie class is concerned. But yeah, I think that's a good explainer there. All right, let's get into so we've talked Burden, we've talked Matthew Golden, Emeka Egbuka out of Ohio State. Ohio State obviously pretty well renowned at this point for churning out some excellent NFL receivers. I'm not sure Egbuka really. Like, if you were to rank the Ohio State receivers from the last few years, I'm not sure he's like in my top 5 necessarily.
He's not KJ Hill, but I just don't see the hype angle with this guy. And I don't mean to be dismissive of him, because he's clearly some version of useful in the NFL. But yeah, I do not see the case for Egbuka being particularly close to like the Burden, Higgins, even Golden types, let alone McMillan.
Yeah, so he had his pro day yesterday after, I believe, not testing at the combine, and it was fine. Like he's a fine player, but like I don't really see like a ton of upside from him necessarily. Like I sort of go back to what you were saying about Marvin Harrison Jr. last year. It's not a direct correlation, but there is a parallel in the sense that like he probably is like a black belt in like certain like technical receiver functions, but I don't necessarily think that like tool shed wise, like he is, some guy that's like, as the kids say, different.
Right. He played a lot of the slot, which is to say he pretty much had the same role that Jackson Smith and Jigba did at Ohio State. And Egbuka's production is good, sure, but it's nowhere near what JSN was putting up. And I think JSN's a good player, but in my opinion, he's not a great prospect. I think he has certain limitations that make it unlikely for him to ever be great. And then Egbuka is something like 3/4 of JSN, which I think at that point I don't know. I'm probably being a little too low on Egbuka, but I am not convinced he's even a starter, or at least I should say, I think he might need to be on a 3 wide offense to start and be pretty much always in the slot. There are guys like Ayomanor St. Brown who, and I guess you could include JSN also in this group of receivers who became obviously very good in the NFL, very valuable fantasy receivers, even though they run something like a 4.6. But I think Egbuka's case, he has about 4.6 speed. I'm sorry, this is like 4.49 or whatever from the Ohio State Pro Day. It's a 4.59 at best. It's like a 4.6. All Ohio State players get juiced 40 times at the Pro Day, and none of them run at the combine anymore. But it's about a force. It's like whatever, a force 5.8 maybe. Those guys, these Ayomanor St. Brown type exceptions, they were super productive. Like I guess you could say there was Michael Thomas in, funny enough, Ohio State. Maybe Michael Thomas is the kind of anomaly you need here for Egbuka to be like a truly standout player. But I don't know, just as a process, it's just also Ohio State wasn't throwing the ball nearly as much back then, if I remember right. That might have been like the Braxton Miller days or something like that.
Yeah, we're talking the Cardale Jones and JT Barrett.
Oh man,
revolving door. What a year that was.
So yeah, I guess you could include Michael Thomas in that list of exceptions too. But it's like you're banking on like a Drew Brees case in one, and an Amon-Ra St. Brown's case, which is, I think, the better signal case study. Amon-Ra St. Brown was insanely productive in college. Egbuka was not. Egbuka was super efficient. He had really clean numbers, didn't make mistakes, doesn't screw up, but he was never dominant at all. And like his target rate per snap doesn't look very encouraging to me. I can't project big plays from him that haven't happened yet on the basis of speed that he doesn't have. I don't know. I think Egbuka is going to go in the second round, maybe the third, but he won't go in the first. And I don't think he's going to compete for boundary snaps on whatever team he goes to his rookie year.
Yeah, like I felt like this year was supposed to be his year, and Jeremiah Smith just like ate his lunch. Now, Jeremiah Smith would eat probably anybody's lunch, but again, it's just like another case where, like you said, really efficient numbers throughout his time at Ohio State. The role ramps up this year: 109 targets, just under 10 yards per target, 10 touchdowns over those 16 games. Remember, 16 games, not just the 12. But yeah, I just can't. I'm gonna let someone else, go for it. Basically,
I see him as what you would call like a 50 grade player. Like he's never going to be a reason why a team is bad. He never will be like a player on a team who the team is looking for a reason to run out. But I think he's going to blend in wherever he goes and be just kind of like a role contributor rather than a player who actually spearheads a passing game.
Yeah. I don't expect him to be that wide receiver one either. Let's see. I guess the next rookie receiver that's up, that's probably worth mentioning. We brought him up last week, but I went ahead and took the plunge on Travis Hunter. His ADP still sticking right around pick 100. I got him at pick 100, ADP 100.9. So it is what is the dynamic that we kind of drew up last week, where it's like, maybe this is the time to get him while he's still in this range. Is that the move? But there is like that downside risk where it's like he gets drafted and he's primarily used as a corner and it ends up being a wasted pick. Is it worth that risk in redraft right now for Hunter to be someone that's on your radar at that stage of the draft?
I think it's justifiable, especially because by the 10th round, that could be something like your wide receiver 5 or whatever. And once you're in that deep on the depth chart, it's kind of like there aren't rules anymore. And whether it was a good process just depends on, whether the luck works the way you want it to. I think the thing with Hunter right now is his price can get higher, in my opinion. And I would be surprised if it got any lower than it is. So I'm not saying anyone needs to care about Hunter, and I'm not saying anyone needs to like get exposure to Hunter this year, but I don't think you have anything to gain by waiting. And I think you can, so if you, for whatever reason, if you do decide you'd like to get some Hunter exposure, I think now might be a better time than in, after the draft, because all it could take is a team drafting Hunter and saying some kind of throwaway quote that they aren't even bound to at all. Something just like, yeah, we want him to play receiver all the time. They could say that and then just didn't mean it. We were lying. It's like we were just saying something and we didn't mean it. But then like he would go in the 4th round or something. Travis Hunter would go from the 10th round to at least the 5th if a team that drafted him and then said, quote, we want him to play lots of receiver. And the reason I'm saying it's not
seeing it now. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's not a substantive quote, because you have to get them to not just say we want him to play receiver all the time. You have to get them to say basically we want him to play receiver all the time and not as much cornerback. And that's a very particular statement, and it's not one, in my opinion, that any team is going to make. But what Hunter is going for him is that he is clearly an excellent receiver. So even if he's limited to like a best case scenario of 35 snaps, like if the team that drafts him makes him mostly play corner, but they get in a shootout and then we're like, or like some receiver gets hurt, and on the team already, and then they're like, okay, Hunter, we got to have you play like 40 snaps in this one. If he does, he is in a unique category of, or he might be in a unique category of talent at receiver, where it's like, this won't be a sustainable sample, but with those 40 snaps, he might be able to draw like 12 targets, and he can do big damage on a per target basis, more than likely. So best ball for sure only is the way I see it. I would have pretty much no interest at all in Hunter in Dynasty or redraft, just because it's like, it's not as if there will be an announcement, like a press conference before his big games, and his big games will happen when he gets the 40 snaps that you didn't expect him to.
Yeah. The quote thought there is so true. Like, I feel like right after the draft, whoever takes him is going to be like, we drafted Travis Hunter because we want all of Travis Hunter.
If a guy selling hot dogs at the stadium said, I heard they're going to play Hunter at receiver a lot this year, 4th round.
Yeah.
4th round.
We got some work to do on our coach speak literacy, but it's going to be something where there's a lot of helium, I think, after the draft, because I think whoever does take him is going to kind of speak in ways to where it's like, yeah, it's basically going to be like Colorado all over again. Everyone's going to go ballistic. And then once rubber meets the road in September, it might be a much different case. Before we get on over to our next receivers, we're going to dig into, some Trey Harris and some Jayden Higgins up next among these rookies. And we'll lump in Elic, Ayomanor as well. But before that, we got a message from our friends over at Pool Genius. You want to win more in your golf, March Madness, and football pools? March Madness, hope everyone's bracket's doing well, but the Masters coming up in a couple weeks here. Well, Pool Genius gives you data-driven picks and strategies to outsmart the competition. With over a decade of analytics and historical data, Pool Genius is the only site dedicated exclusively to helping people win sports pools, with Pool Genius users winning 3 times more often than expected. RotoWire listeners get exclusive offers. Visit poolgenius.com/RotoWire for up to 55% off, or start a 4-day free trial. That's poolgenius.com/RotoWire. Again, keep them in mind for your Masters pools. All right, back to these rookie receivers. Trey Harris, I feel like we've kind of gone dark on Trey Harris. It doesn't seem like a whole lot of discourse among the draft community. It has been centered on Trey Harris over these last couple of weeks. Turns in like the fine combine, everything like that, and had the good production both at La Tech and at Ole Miss. I feel like he's got a lot going for him, but it feels like no one's really saying it. But he is going a decent bit ahead of Jayden Higgins right now. Trey Harris going in the 11th at 131.9. Higgins about a round and a half later at 146.6. I know your sense there is to just wait for Higgins, but is Harris, kind of a worthy guy at this range? And what does his kind of general draft stock look like to you right now?
Well, I do think Higgins is the kind of player who's so cheap right now, like at the 13th round or something. It's like you can end up with shares of him without trying to get them. I think Harris at the higher price, it requires a little more thought. I think he's more the kind of player at this price you want to be kind of a little bit mindful of how much exposure you're taking on, because while Harris has a lot of really, really good stuff going for him, there's, as with any player, a range of potential outcomes here. And with Harris, I think it's just as simple as when you have other good, comparably good, or even, arguably better players at the same position doing better at the combine, it's like you're going to just kind of you're not going to be able to project for the same best case scenarios, in my opinion anyway, as if Harris had, for instance, tested like AJ Brown did. AJ Brown wasn't even that fast. He was, for his size, extremely fast, but it was like a 4.49 or whatever, a 4.51, and it's like the key detail is like, yeah, he was doing that at like 2:30. Harris has the 4.51 at a 6'2", 205, which is almost exactly on the line of average in all three axis there. It's like the height is average, the weight is average, the speed is average, and with that, that's not bad. And with his 4.51, that certainly eliminates some worst case scenarios that might have otherwise existed. So Harris is in a totally good spot, but you're right. He has lost some ground. He shouldn't be forgotten about, but it makes sense that he has kind of slipped a little bit because it's just the dream going into the combine for him was that he might be kind of like the next AJ Brown or something. And even though they clearly weren't built the same, it was like, if you got that loud production and you have like clearly above average athleticism, it makes it easier to take the leap of faith on Harris's production, which is certainly awesome at a glance, but it was obtained with like not very good breadth of applications. Like he was kind of just running.
Right.
It's sort of the classic problem that we're having these days of like the Art Briles offense receivers, the Tennessee receivers. Like it's hard to figure out how good they are at receiver stuff versus like, are they putting up video game numbers because the system is sort of enabling it in a way that the NFL will not. I don't know for sure, but I don't mean to say like Harris is in a bad spot, far from it, but it's just not as easy to overlook stuff like that when the numbers are on the borderline, and if Harris had just tore up the combine, I would have been like, yeah, I don't care about that offensive scheme crap. He's huge and fast and people can't tackle him, and it's we saw that people can't tackle him at the college level. The concern though is like, well, will he be able to do those same tricks in the NFL? And the worse the numbers, the worse the odds.
No, exactly. So I think that's a really good summation there. I mean, like I was really, really hoping for a huge combine from him. And like you said, it's not a bad combine. It's just one that's just not box checking, but yeah, just middle of the road pretty much across the board. Let's see. Jayden Higgins, though. Big production, right. Crazy combine.
Yeah, and I don't know what people are waiting on with Higgins. I think
I'm starting to see it. I'm starting to see it a little bit out there.
Nice. Yeah, I think he's got a really good shot at going in the first round. So as much as I mentioned a few minutes ago, he's so cheap in best ball. You can get plenty of Higgins as like your wide receiver 6 without trying to. I still think he's a player worth trying to get specifically. I think it makes sense to buy Higgins in bulk right now, and then if only to give yourself the option of tapering off later when his price goes up. I think Higgins has checked every box, not just in terms of like clearing out the worst case fears. It's like everything is really good looking, and I know everybody else is looking at it too and thinking like, this guy seems awfully good. His numbers seem awfully good. These testing numbers are awfully good. Oh, but these mock drafts say he's going in the 3rd. I guess I have to wait until the mock drafts say he's going in the 1st before I say that he's good. Like, no, just
right.
Say it now. It's true. It's plainly evident. I think Higgins is really, really similar to Drake London.
I think that's a really good comp. I think that he can do a lot of that same stuff. I think he's the athleticism, the size, the length, all of it there. The production certainly checks the boxes. And he wasn't playing in like a Ole Miss, Trey Harris, Jackson Dart offense. I mean, they got great production.
Jalen Noel is really good too. So I can imagine some people looking at the stats of those two and if they were like a little bit marginalizing Noel, then they look at Higgins's numbers, which are basically identical, and they go like, oh well, Noel's just a slot guy and Higgins didn't even outproduce him, so yeah, whatever, they're just like mid-rounders. Like, no, Higgins is a first rounder and Noel is probably a second rounder too. Like, Noel's really good, so to be able to produce, both of them producing like they did, is impressive, additionally impressive because of how good the other guy was over there, and like competing with Noel for targets and drawing as many as he did. It's hard to stand out the way those two did when there's another receiver is that good on the other side.
And it was Rocco Becht throwing him the ball.
Oh, don't you feel sorry for him? He's going to go back to Iowa State next year and just have like 20 interceptions to 5 touchdowns because he doesn't have Higgins or Noel. And when he had them this year, it was just like easy street.
Yeah, man. I mean, yeah, it's going to look like that Fresh Prince of Bel-Air gif where Will Smith's just kind of standing in the empty foyer. But in Higgins's case, just to give you guys a picture of other receivers, if you're shopping in this particular aisle, Quentin Johnston goes about 12 picks ahead of him. I feel like that's wrong. Xavier Legette, 6 ahead of him. I feel like that's wrong. Romeo Doubs. I love Romeo Doubs, but I don't know. I'm going to take a swing on Higgins, I think, instead, and Coker just a little bit behind as well. All those Carolina receivers.
None of those guys are all that close, in my opinion. Dobbs, I guess, is close. But then in his case, I'm so creeped out by the concussions. I'm scared off by that reason. I think, to me, it would make sense for Higgins to go as high as something like the 8th round. So while he's in the 13th, I'm just kind of, Quentin Johnston admittedly is the one actually out of that list that might, I think Johnston is not very good and clearly is not as good as Higgins, but he's going to play 750 plus snaps for a Justin Herbert offense. And as much as Johnston's been very disappointing, he's not truly bad at everything. He's just worse at some things that we were hoping he'd be better at. And so he's at that price. I actually think Johnston's not a bad price at where he's going right now. It's just, one of those things, like he's like a diversification pick to me.
Yeah, like you're not like bolstering like that part of your draft around him, but it's not the worst thing to pick up a share here or there. Let's get into Stanford's. I really feel like I'm butchering his name, Elic Ayomanor.
So, John, do you remember how I thought Tyler Shuck's name was Tyler Shu?
Yes.
I can't help you on this one. I don't know how his name is pronounced. I think Ayomanor sounds pretty good.
All right, we're going to run with that. No disrespect to him whatsoever. We'll get that buttoned up.
We will learn one day
for the draft. We will,
just like in a year. Or something.
So we don't often. This is kind of funny. We don't often get a college production sample that's so easily comparable year over year. So he played 12 games each of the last 2 seasons, had 112 targets each of the last 2 seasons, had 6 touchdowns each of the last 2 seasons, 62 and 63 receptions in 23 and 24, respectively. The yards per target this year dropped 1.6 yards. So I think, in a sense, I think that there's maybe a little bit more to this now in light of this week that Stanford kind of a mess this past year under Troy Taylor. General Andrew Luck, cleaning house up at Stanford. So I love that. He's just like, he's not the guy. But Ayomanor, like I specifically remember his game against Colorado in 2023, 13 catches, 294 yards, 3 touchdowns, just like one of the most bananas games I think I've probably ever seen. It was kind of at the nadir of Colorado, like, the buzz is coming off of them. It's like mid-October at that point. So that obviously juiced his numbers, but he did have 2 additional 100-yard games in that season. This past year, passing game at Stanford, still not particularly great, but he goes ahead and has 300-yard games this year as well, and still was able to match his touchdown total. But again, the efficiency dropped off this year. So your thoughts on him? He's kind of an interesting cat.
He is interesting. I don't know if I'm going to target Ayomanor a whole lot in best ball. Certainly not redraft. He's probably a little bit more like a dynasty interest to me, but he clearly has a lot of good indicators in his profile. He, as you said, he was productive the last 2 years. I think he was, I guess Stanford did that thing with him where they redshirt him. So he must've been a 3rd-year player at least last year. So he's not that young. He's not like he's not, it shows that he's a sophomore, when you look up at his stats, and he's not that young. But he is still kind of raw, I feel like, or at least untested. And I guess Stanford's quarterback play was so bad, and the offense in general was so bad. That was a brutal looking program, I got to say. It's like they just didn't do anything. They had no thing to do as an offense. They would just fall behind being very slow in the first quarter or two and then start throwing to Ayomanor to catch up in the second half, and which they never were able to do. So he has really good numbers at a glance, in terms of efficiency and all that. I do worry a little bit about how many of Ayomanor's targets in college occurred when the defense was basically playing prevent. For instance, in that Colorado game, not that was what was happening, but he wasn't running against Travis Hunter a whole lot. Like he was kind of, there were a few big run after the catch plays where it was sort of like one person missed their contain or tackle or whatever. I can't remember. And he just sort of ran in a straight line. And once he gets moving, he's tough to bring down because he's, 210 or whatever at 6'2". Ayomanor has the real 4.4 speed, probably mid 4.4. So as a run and catch guy, it makes sense that he would be good at that also in the NFL. Like that kind of speed will definitely play running after the catch, especially if you can break a tackle or two, which he also does pretty well. So I don't know. The thing that I can't tell is will he need development time because of how primitive Stanford's offense was? Or is it more like you can now, if you just plug him into a better offense, he all of a sudden does all these things that he could have done all along, but just never got the chance to at Stanford. I almost wonder if Ayomanor is just maybe there's a risk that he's a little bit raw because of Stanford's primitive offense. And maybe you think of him as like a Gabe Davis kind of faster Gabe Davis with better hands, but like a similar kind of build and physical presence. So if Ayomanor goes high enough in the draft order, so I guess let's say if he goes in the second round and if he ends up on a team that gives him 700 snaps, I think you have a lot of good reason to think he'll be good. It's just he requires a little bit more projection than some of the other receivers in the class. Like I think you could say Trey Harris and this guy and Ayomanor have the most projection to do because there's situations were just so odd that they were playing within, and it's not analogous to the conditions they'll play in the NFL.
Yeah, I think that it's like a really good kind of summation on Ayomanor to the point where I'm probably going to be, depending on how high he goes in the draft, probably going to be hands off as far as redraft and best ball are concerned, at least for the time being, until we are kind of given reason to think otherwise. But
John, sorry, real quickly for me, I just realized the reason I haven't been drafting Ayomanor is because he just goes a little earlier than I expected. If he was there in the 18th or 20th round, I would absolutely take him.
Okay, that's fair. He's going pick 178. He's going a little bit ahead of our guy Pop Douglas and Jalen Noel as well. But I will say I'm interested in Dynasty just because we're again talking about a guy who has had monster games, came from a tricky situation at Stanford and still was able to produce 6'2", 206, big hands, 4.44 speed. I'm interested. In the long term, but it may take him a little bit to get all the way there. Let's end it on these two guys, one of whom was in the news this week, and I want to believe, but I'm finding it tough. Miami's most productive receiver of all time.
That was a bummer.
Xavier Restrepo.
I legitimately thought that might have been a nightmare that I had because I can't remember why I groggily looked at it right before I went to bed, and then when I woke up I was like, oh good, that didn't happen, and then I looked at no it did. So yeah, Xavier Restrepo, and that's like a pro day 4.8, mind you, so it's basically like a 4.9. I almost believe what he was. So the big thing with him is he posted a message saying I was injured, basically, he said he had a hamstring or something like that.
Hamstring, yeah.
I almost believe him because it's just too bad. If he ran a 4.73 or something, I would have been like, oh, I don't know, he's probably lying. But because it was a 4.83 or whatever, I'm like, God, he maybe he was hurt. That's just too. It's worse than the worst case scenario you had in mind. It's one of the things, if he's really running a 5-second 40, it's just impossible to produce like he did. I'm sorry, I don't think it's possible. I don't think a person can run a 4.9 and do those things. A person who runs a 4.75 probably could, though, and that's still slow as hell. So right. I think either way, it's it's clearly not good for his stock. If he can't, he should try to schedule a rerun. Honestly, if he actually can, he should do it because he risks going undrafted with this number. He'll get a camp spot. He'll get a look for sure. But I don't think anyone's drafting a 4.9 receiver who only plays in the slot. I think he could go in something like the 4th or the 5th with a 4.7. Like the extremely still unlikely Wes Welker type anomaly outcome would be in play if he could run a 4.7, you know? But if he's running a 4.85, then it's like, if Restrepo somehow turns out to be good in the NFL while running a 4.8, he will be the first player to do it since probably like 1965 or something.
Yeah, so it's I think this ADP that I'm looking at right now, right around pick 200, probably doesn't have that pro day reaction fully baked in. I wouldn't surprise me if he's going undrafted on underdog at this point as a result of that. Last guy I want to throw your way, Utah State's Jalen Royals. He was someone that was on your radar a bit before the combine. Goes very late in these drafts, right in that same range, 193. It is his ADP, 6 foot, 205 with a 4.42 in the 40. Good production. What's the book on him right now?
Sorry, John, who's this last guy? Sorry.
Royals.
Yeah. So he, I actually almost took him in a draft yesterday because I don't remember getting any shares of him yet, but, honestly, I don't understand why the hype has completely gone silent on him. He did totally good at the combine, and was getting even. I feel like I saw some people suggesting like he might go in the first round, going into the combine. But he did well, and then like me included, everybody stopped talking about him, and that might be a mistake. I certainly didn't come across any reason to get colder on Royals. It was just sort of like, I guess in my case, I got so much more enthusiastic about Higgins having a good combine that I kind of forgot to remember about guys like Royals. But the production is great. It was somewhat short. You only had like 20 games really that he played at Utah, but he was something like a high jump winner in high school or something like that. And the 4.42 is good, especially for a solid build. So I think Royals, if before it made sense to project Royals in the second round, I have no idea why it wouldn't be now, to the point that I'll probably rank him as high as Egbuka and guys like that, if not higher.
Yeah, so I think where we're going to see him, I think, climb up the ADP here as the draft unfolds. But for this next month or so, this might be an excellent time to kind of buy in bulk, because he is going with one of your very last picks. So
I like Ayomanor, but I would definitely take Royals over him by quite a bit.
Very good. Setting the record straight there. I think that covers it, at least for today. There's some other receivers that maybe we'll get into at a later date from this class, but I think that those are the main players right now. We didn't touch on Isaiah Bond or Jalen Noel, but we can certainly do that in another episode. Yeah, I think so too. That's going to do it for us here on this edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Again, breaking down this year's rookie receiver class. Big thanks to our sponsors. And for Mario Puig, I'm John McKechnie. Thanks for listening.